within those large language models, they're designed for neurotypical use, neurotypical understanding. They're very inaccessible if you haven't mastered language.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the PathAble Pod, where we talk honestly, celebrate boldly, and focus on solutions benefiting the disability community. I'm your host, Burt Brooks, co-founder, CEO of PathAble AI. Today, I am joined by John Zweifler. I'm saying that right, I think?
Yeah.
Sure. Jay-Z for short, though, right? What do you prefer, Jay-Z or John Zweifler?
I answer to all of the above. About 20 years ago, Jay-Z and Beyonce got together, and everyone realized my initials were Jay-Z. I thought it would last like 3 weeks, but here we are. So my mother would prefer if you called me Jonathan, but
Jonathan.
I will
Okay.
answer to all of you.
Mom gets precedent. Mom,
right?
Mom gets preference there. All right, Jonathan. He is also the founder and CEO of Read AI, the first communication learning platform purpose-built for neurodivergent life by transforming everyday language into sensory learning experiences so kids can learn faster, understand more, and feel understood. You're also the father of a verbally challenged autistic son and a very accomplished man in your own right, from having a BS from School of Speech in Northwestern, an MS in communication design from Pratt, executive certifications from MIT in artificial intelligence and business model innovation. You've done product design and research and development for Facebook, Xfinity Mobile, American Express. You're the person we want building this kind of tool. This is what I'm seeing. So please introduce yourself. Tell us a bit more about Read AI.
Sure. And Bert, thanks so much for having me. This is going to be a great conversation, and I'm glad we're having this conversation out loud. I'm John Zweifler. I am, as you said, the parent to an awesome, verbally challenged, autistic 11-year-old bear man. I am a dad. I've been a dad a lot longer than I've been a founder. I never really set out to start a company. I was really seeking out ways to fill gaps in everyday life and challenges when natural language, that first language you learn from your parents when you're at your youngest years, just being exposed to language, when that isn't a given. And, really trying to figure out, how do we shortcut to understanding each other better? Not just, okay, there's all this language around you. How do we, get you to learn that? But as humans, as people in a relationship, how can we just understand each other more easily and more often? And that was really the genesis of what has now become Read AI, which is, said simply, it's, a natural language learning platform. What that means is it soaks up and captures all this language that's floating around kids all day. So what they hear and what they see, and transforms that into these sort of sensory optimized experiences to help them understand faster and really learn and hold on to that language that they're starting to understand. So that sounds real lofty, but it can be as simple as like, hey, did you want cream cheese or peanut butter on your bagel? Like things that may feel small or trivial in a typical household. But there's hundreds of little moments like that every day where it's just like, this shouldn't be that hard. It's like, there's got to be a way to do that. And, what started as really pro bono work with my son's school, the Talk School, which is just outside of Philadelphia, Newtown Square, fantastic, magical place with absolute miracle workers of educators and therapists. I just wanted to see if there was a way that I could help sort of lighten their overhead of preparing all of these sort of bespoke, handcrafted materials for each kid, which warmed my heart. But the product guy in me was like, that doesn't scale. Like, you all are going to burn out in trying to do this. And very quickly, that turned into, hey, I think there's a real product here that can not only help to, sort of alleviate some of the overhead in the therapy world, but can start closing that gap between therapy, special ed, and home, because I am a broken record when it comes to the progress, the tangible progress that these therapists and educators are able to make in those one-on-one or focus sessions, like, is magic. It blows my mind. But what about the other 23 hours of the day, 6 days of the week? And the sort of commercial strategy guy in me went, hold on. we have access to a free, unlimited resource, which is all this language that's just floating around, whether it's their favorite show, making lunch for the next day, a book that they're really into that they may not be able to read, but they've got all this language in front of them. That does not, there's no blocker in terms of geography. You can live in a rural community, you got the unlimited resource, doesn't discriminate against socioeconomic status. We all have access to this resource that is going untapped. And how do we start harnessing that so that the average run-of-the-mill parent like me, who does not have a master's in speech and language pathology or occupational therapy, or right, how can we start leveraging that resource to reinforce and support that magic that is happening with those amazing specialists?
Yeah, yeah. And you hit on a really key point that is just it's coming up more and more in access tech. The need for scalability.
Hmm.
These miracle workers, which, my experience, same thing. There's no replacing an excellent job coach, teacher, any number of support staff, caregivers. There's no replacing that. But with the funding that is out there, with the opportunity that's out there, unfortunately, we need to find these scalable solutions to keep those individuals in those jobs making the miracles they make, right? So can
Absolutely.
you tell me a little bit more about that in terms of like how you're looking to scale and support that community?
Is a public benefit corporation, and it is a for-profit venture by design. Why? Because the commercial innovation, the innovation that you see at scale that goes into millions, if not billions of households, is driven out of the commercial marketplace. So we have a nonprofit sibling, the Reed Adaptive Impact Foundation, because part of our mission is really grounded in how do we get as many, everyday solutions and tools to the people who need them. But we believe that if we are going to create consumer grade innovation, get adoption at scale, and hold ourselves to the same bar that an Apple or Google or Microsoft would in terms of, are we continuing to meet needs? Are we continuing to evolve, the value that our products and services are able to deliver? You need that commercial mindset. So we've we very intentionally structured ourselves for both profit and purpose from the outset. And our ambition is that that profit can also help to fuel easier access, whether it's geographically or school districts or folks that just, it's like don't have, 50 bucks, let alone, or $5 a month to spare on, a tool that could make a difference for them, how we can start breaking down some of those barriers and be in control of doing that. Control meaning velocity. Like I'm an impatient product development guy. I spend a lot of time in R&D and doing 0 to 1 launch, and I want to iterate fast. I want to, when something's working, I want to validate it. I want to scale it, and I want to move on to the next big thing that is going to move the needle for people in their lives. So, yeah, we by design, and it's our founding team is structured around this. We are here to bring consumer grade innovation standards to what has traditionally been, lagging in that regard. In that it's most of the tools today are born out of a clinical environment. Now, we are not clinicians. We are not clinicians. We are not clinicians. I
I've
play one on TV. It's important to call that out because what I feel very strongly about is there is magic happening in the trenches in that one-on-one session with a kid, or in that special ed classroom, as well as there is a ton of amazing research that is underway that is very promising for innovations on the horizon. My agenda is how do we take what is working and get that into people's lives as soon as possible, not at the expense of longitudinal studies and making sure that it's like, oh, we have the real, hard and fast evidence for this. But the gap is so big between what is available to folks and the everyday challenges they have. And we're on a clock, a kid's
yeah,
brain, neurodiverse or neurotypical, it evolves and is, sort of ready to develop and take on certain learning at certain age. So we have to find the things that have really strong signal, either from the trenches or from academia. We need to pull on those threads and be a part of validating that out in the real world, while the real experts and clinical leaders are doing the due diligence around the academic side of it.
Yeah. And I have to tell you that, Pathable AI, we took the same approach in terms of the value that needs to be brought to this community. And, we're focused on kind of the employment side and getting people ready for their careers. But that we structured the same way because I come from nonprofit where you get to see the system held together by advocates, donations, everything that you
Right.
can pull together with sticks and twine. But when you see the rising rates of autism, neurodiverse learning, the value that these individuals can bring to our society, is
Mhm.
something we should invest in, and not in a stigmatizing way, because some of that medical clinical side of things can be
Mhm.
stigmatizing. And I
Sure.
just love that you're designing this product in a way that is it's forward thinking. It looks together, professional, pull, it just looks so wonderful. And if anyone saw it, and I encourage you to go to meetread.ai to
Mhm.
check it out yourself, because once you see it, you're like, oh, this kind of innovation can only come from someone who is A, investing in it, and B, is invested in it, like you are.
Thank you for that, because we are actively in alpha testing right now in households. We started in working with clinicians in schools. The real rubber hits the road when you get out into an average household, because yes, every kid is unique, but every family is unique. Every household routine is unique. So I wanted a big, hairy product design challenge, and I got it. But we are part of our DNA is co-design within the community to deliver the outcomes that that community needs. And it's important to note that yes, I have a focus and vested interest in my world in the autism space, but there's a journey that every parent goes on when they have that moment when a kid's 2 or 3, and they're like, huh, it's like something seems a little off there, or like, that's interesting. When I see them playing with these kids are doing that and mine isn't. And that seed gets planted. And there is no parent on earth who's saying, oh gosh, you know what? Let's run out to a clinician and see if we can get diagnosed or something. Right. In
Yeah.
fact, there's like, you have a visceral gut reaction against that. And there are these, what we call sort of like the 6 stages of that family journey, where you go from, sort of denial of just sort of like, no, 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 like it's a delay, it's this, to, this sort of the grief of, well, I had envisioned my life and my family a certain way, and now I need to give up that, to, getting into the, okay, well, how do we get practical? What do we do? And so on. But I'm very big on, um, we lean into the divergence, not the diagnosis. So if you have a 3-year-old where it's just sort of like, huh, it seems like, they're not necessarily, catching on with this or that. I don't want to ask another parent or have them feel like they need to go through like a diagnostic evaluation to use an app that might be helpful for their kids. Because at the end of the day, you know what the interventions are for a 3-year-old who's diagnosed with autism, or a 3-year-old who might have a developmental delay? They are exactly the same. We don't put a lot of weight on what is your diagnosis. Is it dyslexia? Is it ADHD? Is it autism? Is it a combination of those? The reality is there's a divergent learning path there. And how do we meet those kids where they are to help sort of scaffold that growth, and in a way that, you know, can work and make sense for them. So yeah, it's divergent first, diagnosis second.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, and we even know when someone does want to go for that diagnosis, there's wait lists and there's issues there
Yeah.
as well, right? So
That's
you're
absolutely
you're
one of the gaps. You could be waiting 18 months just to say, "Oh, okay, now we have confirmed what we've basically known for the last year and a half." And then the wait list for, okay, well, I need to find the right, therapist or clinician. I need to get on their schedule. And, years later, you may be on, oh, we found the best person, we're only able to get them about an hour a week. So
Mhm.
there are so many different gaps to try to fill, which is why we're so passionate about cracking the code on how do we make little everyday moments, potential learning moments, because there aren't enough awesome clinicians in the world. There's not enough money to pay them to get those hours a day that you need versus what can end up being like minutes a week for far too many families.
Yeah, yeah, and, you know, and you were saying earlier about, getting to that iteration, getting it to market, getting it in people's hands, because ultimately, yeah, there's a ton of research, obviously, from a
Mhm,
clinical perspective, but when you're looking at tech usage, when you're looking at, new solutions, AI in
mhm,
particular, right? We
mhm.
don't have the data that we can build off of, but without that data, nothing will be built, at least not
Right.
properly. So
Mhm.
getting into the market, getting it in people's hands, yeah, you're going to get to where you want to go faster, right?
Yeah.
Which is key.
Yeah. And there's no greater indicator of how someone values the what your product delivers than their checkbook. Like, don't mean to sound crass, but like
Mhm.
paying for something month over month because you're like, this thing is adding value in my life. That's a very strong signal. It's not the only signal. The progress needs to be real and it needs to be visible. Uh, but yeah, it's why we feel strongly about going direct to consumer. Also, because as you mentioned before, that you may wait a year or two, in between these sort of understanding moments of diagnosis or finding the right support. One thing that frustrated me as a parent who knew nothing about this space but wanted to do something to help, you feel very boxed into, well, I don't know what I'm doing and I need an expert to help me say, like, what are the tools I need? Is there an app I should download? Is there a workbook? Are there activities? How do those activities work? And when that happens, it's great, but you just don't feel empowered to be like, is there something out there that is sort of clinician trusted that even I could use? Not make the same bounds that they are, but like get the train moving in the right direction. When my son was younger, and I'm talking about 5 or 6 years ago, I mean, there was nothing. There was no path. You literally just sort of needed to find the right person and trust them and be like, okay, so what do we need at home?
Yeah. I call it the parent shadow network, right? The
Yes.
experts in the industry are fellow parents. And it's not until you start to meet other people who've gone through the same struggles you are. And it's like everybody's kind of handing the torch down so that you can
Mhm.
close that gap in the time it takes to learn and grow. Because even, we said like finding that clinician, but it's like learning about those clinicians curve is so high.
Yeah, no, and you nailed it right on the head where like one thing we're really focused on is how do we really harness the digital version of that parent to parent discovery that like because I do have a neighbor whose son was on the spectrum before ours, and they were one of our first experts of just like, hey, I think we're in the same boat. Yeah, I know every kid's different, but like what are you doing? Where are you going? What should we stop doing? We can't seem to make this happen, that happen. And it doesn't, it's never apples to apples because every kid is different. But knowing that there are people like literally in your community or, peers of yours, whether they live across the country, where it's like, aha, it's like, this isn't just our house. Like, this is a thing. Ah, great. It's a thing. It's, and it it's a big reason why what what are often considered micro influencers in the large world of social media are actually lifelines for millions of families who are sort of going through that journey of, hey, I think something might be a little bit not typical. Is that typical for anybody else? And we have friends who we have never met in person, but I like consider them extended family because we started following them when they were documenting what was going on in their world. Then my wife started DMing about Bravo shows and things like that, and a friendship evolved. But I say a lot of times, like, you can tell when you sort of walk into a room and it's like, ah, I'm with my people. It's like everybody gets it. There's no like, what accommodations do we need? It's like, hey, it's like we're all being flexible 24 hours a day because that's what our life requires. And that community is incredibly powerful.
Yeah. And here's something I've seen from some of the new technology coming out that I am super pumped about is the ability to translate this to individuals who are not in our community, which ultimately fights the stigma that surrounds it.
Mhm. Yes.
It's this group education, right? That needs to go beyond our shadow network and into the light.
Yeah. And it's one of the harder things that we acknowledged about the opportunity but challenge of Read when we first started was our bar has always been, this has to be something that an untrained average civilian parent can be like, okay, I know how to do this. I was like, it needs to be as simple as like, you just talk, and Read is that sort of middleman to help connect those dots. Because if it's harder than that, the social norm gets broken. And because that's where stigma comes from, right? It's like, that's different. And it's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. That makes me feel uncomfortable. Like there's some guy with an iPad and it's talking. It's, the stigma arises from that's not typical. So I believe that the future of adaptive learning, of adaptive tech, of assistive tech is, how do we make it easier for typical and divergent folks to intersect in everyday social moments without anyone having to learn an extra set of social rules, or what's the interaction model, right? From a societal and from a product standpoint that we should be aiming at.
When someone comes up and they see the different, right? And that
Mhm.
sparks the anxiety in them because they're not sure what to do. They're always,
Right.
can't imagine what it would be on the other end, right? Where it's like that sense of empathy starts to degrade because the connection just isn't able to be made. But I do see the telltale signs as it starts to come up, which happens all the time with disability accommodations and technology, of the curb cut effect, right? Where
Mhm.
everyone can start to benefit, everyone can start to learn from these tools.
Absolutely. 100% plus 100%. One thing, when I was at Comcast, I authored the inclusive design strategy for Comcast NBC Universal. And a key sort of foundation of that was their work doing the voice remote for their TV experience. And it's a great example because that originated as an accessibility feature where it was like, we want anyone to be able to enjoy the content that they want to. And what they started to find was, because, we're talking about cable, this was back when it was like 3,000 channels, a billion things on every moment. It was actually the best way to search and find what you wanted, regardless of disability or not. It was the gold standard for how to find what you were looking for and enjoy it. And that was, sort of the inspiration that we wanted to ride on for the entire strategy there, of how do we find things that simply make it a better experience and take down that barrier that had previously existed. So we're not talking about like, oh, cool, what are the new accessibility features in this product or that product, but being like, okay, how are we making this product experience as awesome and valuable as it can be? Oh, and by the way, it's like there's no accessibility issues.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because the human experience changes, it adapts in response to and with technology as we develop it. It always makes sense, but not everyone knows that. And we have grace, we try to develop and build, but but we know we need those bridges. If we don't build them, nobody can cross.
And there's also sort of debunking the notion of, disability is sort of this innate thing you either have or don't. Because, a big part of our thinking there was like, hey, there are millions of people every year that are aging into disability, whether that's dementia or vision or hearing, or like, we're all going to be in this category, folks. On a long enough timeline, we all fall into that bucket. It's not, this thing that happens to certain folks. It is a fact of life. So the on your life journey, you are going to need to access products and experiences and services in a different way than you did for a long time. If companies want to keep those customers, they need to be always thinking about how does our product or service adapt for where our customers are. Otherwise, I think to their chagrin, they will find that subscribers are going to go off a cliff when they hit a certain age.
Yeah, absolutely. And the I always like to say, everyone, you're lucky if you live long enough to get a disability or acquire a
Right?
disability, right?
It's
That's
a great problem to have.
right, right. Like, wow, I'm here. And honestly, that's how it started with me. And I feel like it starts a lot with many people. So, someone asked me recently, like, "Oh, why are you doing what you're doing?" And I said, "Because I'm selfish." Because ultimately, yeah, a golden rule. I'm going to treat other people the same way I would want to be treated if I was in their shoes, right?
Mhm. So, my ambition for Read AI is that it rides along with your life. So it is not this thing that gets in the way. It's not this blocker or gate to, oh, wait, like, let's get out Read so we can do this. But it's able to push in and pull out when there's that, gap in, understanding or what have you. That's part one. So examples are, hey, we're going to the grocery store and Reed's going to ride along with us because, I'm going to be using all this vocab like broccoli and tomatoes and potatoes and da da da. And you're going to help me do some grocery shopping. That's not a classic structured learning moment, but it's like it could be. It could be a reinforcement one. Or hey, let's listen to our favorite song in the car again. And being able to have the language of those lyrics come to life in what would have literally been just like, garbage time. Like, hey, okay, we got to drive to the thing and then drive back. And Reed being able to sort of be that sidekick for learning in everyday moments. I would say that's the foundation. Secondarily is talk about gaps a lot. And, the gaps that happen between, life at home, life at school, like progress at therapy. There's no visibility between those three sort of touch points that make up everyday life for most kids and families, to the extent where I always sort of joke, it's like you go and you pick up your kid from a therapy session, it's like, oh, hey, how'd they do? And it's like, oh, you did great, you had a great day. And it's like, awesome, okay, cool, I'll see you next week. And it's not a knock on anyone. It's just sort of like, okay, even if there are little things where it's like Reed can be that sort of sidekick and ride along in, a half an hour of one-to-one therapy, being able to bring that visibility back to parents on like, oh, interesting, they're starting to work on these kinds of words. Like I'll make a point of like modeling those out when they, arise in life, because I know that that's going to sort of support what they're focusing on. That sounds so small and simple, but there's that gap exists. There's no visibility. And I mean, like I've said before, we trust these practitioners, over the moon. They're amazing, but there's no way for us to, in a lightweight way, support what they're doing. And also vice versa. Like I want a therapist or a special ed teacher to be able to be like, wow, they've been really interested in rocket ships at home because we see, that's what they're engaging with or talking about. And it's like, that might be an interesting, entry point for some like motivational engagement around this next area we're going to do. So like, there's all these little things that can help really like the whole ecosystem of support and learning. So yeah, it's like that visibility and that ability to sort of be that sidekick that augments but doesn't get in the way of everyday life. That is what we've been designing for from our R&D days, and it's what we're working with our alpha and soon beta families to make sure that the rubber is really hitting the road there, so that we're not just sort of talking our own hype, but at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, my kid doesn't feel like doing homework on Read, and it's like, no, it's not about that.
But that's the feedback you get, right? Those are the things that people are truly concerned about. And I do think, even to what you were saying earlier about, my co-founder and I, we talk about it where it's like, it just needs to work, right? It just needs to
Mhm.
work. The tech just needs to work. People don't want to take that extra step because they're already stressed, they're already in an unknown environment, right?
Mhm.
And trying to, I always talk about how once you enter this world, your brain rewires itself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to be empathetic for someone. It's another thing to be actively empathetic, right? To take action. And
Mhm.
in doing so, in trying to understand someone else's experience, you're learning new ways to experience the world. And that's huge. That opens up so many doors. So, I mean, being able to use your tool to what is it? I guess the term triangulate, right? That learning process to include teachers, therapists, parents, everyone, and then have it follow along. It's creates. I was talking to someone the other day. It's we don't need individual solutions. We need community solutions.
Yeah. And that's why we say we're designed for families, even though it's like,
Yeah.
well, who's the learner? It's like, well, the primary, user is, it goes on the kid's iPad, but it's like it's designed for inherently, social connections and interactions. You can't have a conversation by yourself, right? So trying to fill that gap, but also to your point about like, learnings from the real world outside of the lab. One thing that I know I was knocking the whole like homework thing before, but we have Bear has a younger sister, Zoe, who's the biggest ally you will ever meet. She is amazing. They are besties. And that sibling relationship, even with young kids, is also an untapped opportunity. One thing that we learned from a family that candidly I wasn't super confident, where I'm like, oh, Reed is the right fit for this type of kid. They found that their entry point into daily usage was, their son Leo. He likes to use Read when his typical brothers are doing homework at homework time, because he feels like, okay, it's like I get to do homework like my brothers now. And his brothers are like, oh, you're doing such a great job. And it's like I'm getting goosebumps talking about it, because I'm like, we didn't design for that case, but there's all these untapped opportunities that are, micro learning opportunities and social opportunities that they add up. And
Mhm.
we are very much big on, look, the clinicians, the practitioners, the educators, like they're doing the heavy lift, they're going to be making the big bounds, but there's a million little micro moments that add up to a big deal in between those big leaps that they're making, and that's what Reed is really focused on.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. The cumulative effect is undeniable. I mean, this hopefully isn't happening any longer, but when I first kind of started in this industry, I would get calls from like a 70-year-old woman whose 50-year-old son she's been taken care of
Mhm.
whole life, had access to no supports, just thought I had to do it on my own and I had to do it however I could. But now I physically can't do it any longer.
Right.
Right. It's just, I only think back to now where like, oh, if the tool was there, that kind of cumulative effect, because no person is an island,
Mhm.
and the ripple effects it can have from, crassly like the economy, state,
Sure, sure.
everything. It just compounds over time. It affects everyone. And when we solve these issues, when we work together to solve the issues, we all benefit, right? And I just so happy to see you're doing what you're doing the way you're doing it, because it's not, I've only really truly started to see it more recently.
Mhm.
It's and I've been in this industry 20 years now, something like that. So to see people like you coming out and developing these kinds of solutions with top tier technology, which I do want to get into. Actually, one other thing is, are you encountering any fears around the AI of it all?
Yeah, great question. AI has a lot of clouds and baggage associated with it, and we put it in our name, so we asked for it. Fortunately, when it comes to the role of AI in the space that we're in the read world, we've taken the approach very much from the data side versus the model side. So what do I mean by that? I mean, when you look at all of these amazing, huge, large language models that we all now use every day for all sorts of things, the Anthropics, the OpenAIs, the Geminis of the world. Those are incredibly powerful. There's no little startup that's going to be like, oh, right, I just invented the new Gemini killer. It's like, no, you didn't. They're they're progressing so quickly that those tools being available to a startup are tremendous. That's why we take the tact of we've architected to be model agnostic, which means we are going to use the best models for the task that Reed needs to deliver on. We use multiple models, some, not, that have been around for a while, others that are cutting edge, and we cherry pick and swap out models based on what we think is delivering the best. Because, you know, the AI space changes seismically every quarter. So we don't want to be tied to, oh, they used to do it this way, now they do it that way, and now our experience, has gone sideways. But within those large language models, they're designed for neurotypical use and neurotypical understanding. They're very inaccessible if you haven't mastered language. So what we're doing is essentially saying, hey, look, huge, powerful models, love using you. Thank you so much. We will keep sort of riding the wave that is the billions of dollars that you're pumping into advancing these things. We're all for it. What's missing and what we view our tech to really differentiate on is the connective tissue between those large language models and a non-typical learner or communicator. So what we a lot of our model use is around creating what we call sensory language data. So we have this library that grows by hundreds of words every week to bring together the pieces that are missing in a typical LLM. So for example, if excellence, we're going to take that word, I see it in your backdrop. When we add excellence to the library, we are sending it out to be like, okay, what is the full word pronunciation of excellence for US English in this dialect? Great. What is the syllable breakdown of that word? How many syllables are there? Where do the breaks happen? What's the vocalization for each syllable? What is the phonetic breakdown of that word and by syllable? And how do we map those phonetics to the common literacy learning methods like Orton-Gillingham or Dubard's association method, so that literally you can flip a switch and be like, encode this for me, the way an awesome practitioner would hand encode. It's like, oh, this is a better way to learn. So we also, create a description of like, well, what does excellence mean in the context of language? How is it used? And we take all that and then we say, okay, well, how would you symbolize this concept based on that description and everything and the tags associated with like, what kind of word is this? How is it used? We have a 3-step process where we say, excellence, what part of speech is it? And all that magic across multiple different models goes out and within less than 5 seconds brings back this unit of sensory language that we're then able to plug in all the pipes to of like, okay, is there certain haptic or audio haptic feedback we want to pipe in to the syllables so that we're reinforcing the structure of it when you go through? Is there sing-songiness that we want to reinforce with certain gestures and use certain aspects of the structure to trigger that? That bringing all of that metadata together in like a smart, like architected little unit times thousands and thousands of thousands, that's the magic of Read AI. Because we can then take that and we can use all these awesome models to surface it in real time, to understand the context that they're in of like, oh, you're at the grocery store. So like, there's probably, we don't have to do homonym checks on certain words because it's like, we know that, in that geographic location, you're probably talking about this or not that. And same thing, oh, you're at home and your dog's name is Penny and you added that to you customized your library. So when you say, hey, go pick up Penny, we're not going to show a coin. We're going to show a picture of your dog that you added.
Yeah.
So that's the adapting, like hyper adaptation down to Penny's our pet dog, but making it just like, oh, that was easy. Hiding all the smarts behind the scenes. But, for us, it's really about the data that's missing in those big LLMs that we use today, to make the power of those models, resources for people it frankly wasn't designed for.
You're going to have to work with us on this. We developed our first set of AI accessibility benchmarks that we want to test.
Yeah.
So when new models come out, we're always testing on math and STEM and all these different measurements. Well, how are we testing on visualization, on its ability to adapt? Can it speak on a first grade level? Can it speak on a PhD level? How does it shift? Can it give step-by-step instructions that is understood by a neurodiverse population? These are the kinds of things we want to start measuring to also, yes, give those billion-dollar companies something to strive towards, right? Because they don't have it, which I understand. They got AI erotica bots to make.
Right. I mean, there's a priority list here. So, but yeah, I mean, the good news, bad news, like good for innovation in the space, not great for society, is, what used to be viewed as this sort of fragmented landscape of like, oh yeah, there's this type of disability or, vision, hearing, what have you. Looking at that TAM, that total addressable audience now, you're talking about millions of users in many cases, if not billions, if you go globally, in many cases could have life-changing applications or use of a ChatGPT, of a Gemini. And, for those companies, those are long lifetime value, long tenure potential customers who it's just money sitting on the table. Like I will appeal to their greediness if it motivates them. That's cool. But like the commercial opportunity is real. And I think as some of these larger companies start seeing that beyond, oh, this is a good, sort of PR moment for us, but like, wow, like we can untap 20 million users there if, we're able to accommodate XYZ, money makes the world go round. If that's what they need to be motivated by, okay, let's find ways to motivate.
I love it. I think that's great. Everyone, I encourage you, definitely check out, I want you to meetread, meetread.ai. And what is the link for your foundation as well?
It is readforall.org. Yes. Yeah. And so if you are interested in participating in co-design, you could be a school district that wants to do a pilot to see how Read can support or augment your special ed or generalization needs in your school. If you're a family office that is mission aligned with the type of innovation that we want to accelerate into market, readforall.org is a great place to start.
Jonathan, this has been incredible. Thank you so much. Yeah, we look forward to the future.
Bert, I don't want to go anywhere. I want to keep going. Let's just keep going, man.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the PathAble Pod, our first episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe and visit pathableai.com/podcast for more episodes. Have a great day and thanks for listening.